Hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
Time to get out of the cold and hit Orlando for Dev Intersection?
What? Yeah, that's right. March 25th to 28th at the Swan Hotel in Orlando for another great Dev Intersection. All your favorites are going to be there, including Scott Guthrie and Scott Hanselman.
Ah, the greater and lesser Scott.
Yes.
And if SQL is your thing, Paul Randall and Kim Tripp are, as usual, running an awesome set of SQL sessions.
And this year at Dev Intersection, we have a special emphasis on new artificial intelligence technologies, including deep learning, cognitive services, and more.
And, of course, all the latest web tech, Angular, C#, Visual Studio, all your favorites.
So go to devint.netrocks.com right now and register. Sign up for a workshop as well, and you'll get some cool hardware.
We'll see you there.
Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
On day 3 of NDC London.
The last day.
The last day.
That's fine.
But this is a very exciting show for us because Mr. Scott Guthrie is here. We'll be talking to him in just a minute.
Indeed.
Yes.
And it's been a while since we had him on the show.
Yeah.
He's been busy.
Yes, we're breaking a few trends here, and I'm going to break another trend with Better Know Framework. So run the crazy music.
Awesome. All right, dude, what do you got?
It's more like a self-imposed rule. Remember I told you I would never again talk about Kickstarter campaigns?
Yes.
Because we said, oh, that looks cool to one, and then it turned out to be completely
disastrous.
Yeah. However, I want to talk about this one, whether or not it's real. The world's first graphene battery USB-C power charger for cell phones.
A graphene battery USB-C, huh?
Yeah. Apollo is the name of it on Kickstarter. And they had a $10,000 goal. Now they're up to $107,000. So
clearly there's other people who want this to be true, too.
Yes, that's right.
That's really interesting.
Fully funded in under 24 hours.
Holy man.
And they claim that you can fully charge your phone in 20 minutes.
Huh. See, I think that's more of a factor of the phone than the battery.
You think so?
Absolutely. How quickly can the battery itself inside the device take on charge? So,
yeah.
But I guess you're going to throw as many watts at it as you want.
Right.
And, it's just, I think at some point the phone itself is going to go, nope.
Yeah. That is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I knew you'd have an interesting comment about it because it's been a while since we talked about graphene.
Sure.
And its supposedly many miraculous, wondrous properties.
Yeah, I just don't understand why people think a power pack is the thing that sets the speed of charging and not the device.
That is a really good point, Richard.
But hey, I want a graphene battery to exist.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Heck, I might even back the project. I don't know if I'll ever see my money again. Yeah. But that's happened to me a few times.
Yep. You kind of have to think of it as a gamble.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. And while we're recording this, the Kickstarter's still going. By the time this publishes, it won't be.
4 days to go.
It's 4 days to go. We're shooting this in January. It comes out in February. So
who knows? This could be a complete ruse by now.
It's not enough money. My mindset has always been it's the $10 million Kickstarter where the guy's going to go at the end of it. Thanks for the cash, suckers, and take off. Right. But because they literally pay out the moment it ends if it makes the threshold.
Right. We'll revisit this and report back and see what happens. But that's what I got today.
That's awesome, dude.
It could be. Who's talking to us, my friend?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1471, which we did at NDC Oslo back in 2017, so just last year. And this was the Going Serverless panel.
Yeah.
You talk about here we are sitting with the guy who helps make the cloud come true. This was one of the conversations about new cloud technology. That panel was Rob Connery, Lynn Langett, and Matthias Brandeweiner.
Yeah.
Great conversation. We went all over the place. And the reason I picked those three folks is I knew they were all doing serverless differently.
Right.
There's the Azure function side. There's the AWS Lambda side. There were many choices there. And Lee Odes has this awesome comment because he talks about something else.
Okay.
He says, hey, this was a great episode, but no one talked about AWS step functions.
Okay.
I didn't even know they existed. I'm loving them and using them to provide the plumbing between groups of lambdas. This leaves my Lambdas as simple and single responsibility as possible, and then I pass JSON messages through the, quote, pipeline. So the step functions, actually, he goes on to explain this pretty well. So, for example, one Lambda to process data, another one to call a third-party system, and another to store a part of the JSON to Dynamo, which is storage mechanism. Retries on failure for each step are built in, because so step function is actually playing a workflow role here. So it's where your recovery options are. It's like all of that plumbing so that you can keep your individual functions, really pure. You can fork the execution path based on a return value, and you get nice visual diagrams of what path the execution took, the input and output of each step, and so on. So we've broken up each business event, like a new user, and create a step function to handle it. So they're literally defining a workflow that calls into these
with all these little functions.
That's right. Yeah. If we wanted to extend the functionality, such as sending an email to a user, we build in a new Lambda and modify the step function.
Neat.
And add a call to step into it. No code changes are necessary on any of the existing parts.
And that's the important thing.
It's all about the dependencies, right?
Yeah.
And step functions are immutable, so you always create new ones, optionally using an existing step function as a template.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I love in a comment. I feel smarter at the end of it. That's really neat and a great thought. And we're now going to harass a vice president from Microsoft about why it doesn't exist in Azure.
Probably does, actually.
I think he'll probably tell us that. So, Lee, thank you so much for your comment. A .NET Rocks mug is on its way to you. And if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or via any of our social media, because we publish every show to Facebook and Google+. And if you comment there or read it on the show, we'll send you a mug.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. I'm at Carl Franklin. He's at Rich Campbell. Send us a tweet. They're serverless by design.
They have an awesome workflow.
Okay.
How do you introduce this guy?
I don't know. He's wearing a red shirt. He's awesome. He has more patents than anybody else that I know of.
I don't know if they actually. Have you got a lot of patents?
I have a decent amount. Yeah.
I've got 6.
I've got maybe 20 or 30 or so.
Well, I clearly win because I have 0. So
mine are all in performance tuning stuff from Strangeloop.
Yeah.
But you could be all over the map.
Yeah, a lot with sort of ASP.NET and .NET in the early days. I haven't got a patent recently.
No,
but
you don't do any real work anymore.
Slacking, yeah. But you have to be kind of pretty directly involved to get the patent.
Well, I got it. I know you love writing code. I see you do it whenever you possibly can. I've watched you work with friends of mine on different demo projects and so forth. You've got to struggle over best use of your time at sometimes because you have so much influence in so many different areas and a tremendous number of people reporting to you. I don't know that you get to do what you enjoy.
Yeah. Why are you wasting time with us?
Yeah.
No, I mean, part of the reason I do these, so I'm on a speaking tour right now in Europe. And so I'm doing
the Red Shirt Tour.
Yeah. So I think it's 7 events in like 9 days or something. There's a weekend in between, so I get Saturday and Sunday off. It's fun. I mean, it's basically, I do kind of like 5 hours of talking in each city, and
with lots of demos, I'm sure.
Yeah, like 44 demos or something. And so it's it's a slide or two demo.
Yeah.
I just did the keynote here in NDC this morning, and it was it was probably of 60 minutes, 45 of it was demos.
Yeah, nice.
And it's both, I think, kind of fun in the sense of I believe in kind of how do you build products that when you show it to people, they get excited.
Yeah.
And so I'm much more of a fan of show, don't tell.
Yeah.
And then build your products so that when you show them, it is exciting.
Yeah.
And then also, it's a great opportunity for me to just be hands-on with the product. And there's nothing like, having to talk for an hour in depth on a topic to an audience of people that might already be experts on the topic to force you as the speaker to become
really step up,
good at it. And so, and I always come back with, a list of usability items I want people to fix.
Yeah.
And,
these could have been easier.
Yeah. And so it's, it's a really good way for me to kind of just stay grounded and stay close to the tech. And, and it's fun to be able to show it to people.
And I know you interact with folks like James Montemagno, who's a friend of the show, friend of ours, been on tour with us and so forth. I've seen him on stage with you a number of times.
Yep.
And I've had a chance to have conversations like, you're a demanding keynoter. He works very hard for you. But I have noticed that his own stuff is phenomenal. Yep. Like his examples, the stuff he's building in GitHub and so forth for us to help in mobile development. I think I'm going to blame some of that on you. Like I think you push pretty hard to really show off the potential of this stuff.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're trying to do is, it's not just talk about the features in the esoteric sense and like, oh, here's a Hello World demo, but like, how do we try to build more real world apps and share more kind of app code as opposed to just a feature code? And, I think it really, anything that's developer based or cloud based, if it's too abstract or if it's too kind of wishy-washy, it's just really hard to use.
Yeah.
And
it's part of the strategy that you're driving us as developers to a set of platform tools that we use. Like life would be pretty simple if you were just selling VMs and it's up to us as developers to put everything we need in the VM. But you don't. That seems to not be the strategy.
Yeah, I think what we're certainly seeing is sort of an evolution of the cloud. Having the ability to spin up VMs and run arbitrary code is super important because there's always some part of your system where either you might want to do something completely custom or have complete flexibility and control over.
Right.
And being able to always drop down and just run your own custom VM with whatever you want is super powerful.
Yeah.
And, we've certainly found with the cloud, Azure didn't originally have that support. And so that was a big gap that we had and an issue. But at the same time, if as a developer, you're deploying everything just into a raw VM that you then have to patch and maintain and wire up your own load balancer.
Who would do that? That's how we basically started when we moved all the .NET Rock stuff
over. But that was a lift and shift move.
It was a lift and shift move, and that thing is still running, and I still am like nervous about it. It's
you sort of get uncomfortable touching it. You're sure not, and then.
But you've also peeled a lot of things out of it.
Yes, I have.
I think I feel like we're a good case study. It makes me comfortable that you shift the VM, make sure everything's working, and we're alive.
Yeah,
and then bit by bit, we've made Azure websites and things that have just peeled. Arguably the most important bits. I think it's very challenging to even show enough value to get to the point of turning that VM off.
That's it, right?
You're down to the 20%, and the 20% is just not that important.
And the problem is you don't really have like a dashboard that tells you everything that's running on it and where it is.
Yeah.
And, at some point when you pull the plug, you're going to find out.
Yeah. It's like I'm literally going to have to stop this VM and listen for the scream.
That's right. At some point.
And I think, for a lot of apps that move to the cloud, doing a lift and shift is a great step one.
Sure.
Because it, basically gets you into the cloud.
Yeah.
And then the thing I always tell people is that don't ever arbitrarily, if something's working, don't rewrite it unless you have a good reason to.
Right.
Yeah.
And so,
I felt like we've done that. We've peeled off what we need.
Yeah. And so when you need when you want to invest in new capabilities, that's a great time to say, now I'm going to refactor this part of the app or this part.
And take advantage of something that Azure's giving us.
And so, we've seen lots of cases, whether, our web app service, which is super popular, at some level you kind of go, wow, how hard is it to run a web server in a VM? It's not that hard.
Yeah, but it's not the best use of your time either.
But it's not the best use of your time. And especially when you start saying like, oh, now I want to do continuous integration and continuous delivery. Oh, now I want to do log aggregation across 5 VMs to be able to do or cert management or, patch management or et cetera, et cetera. And that's where, even a service like our web app service, which is a very well-known pattern of an app, can add tremendous value just because it makes it easier. And certainly then when you look at things like serverless computing or, take, for example, some of the new container orchestration work we're doing with our AKS Kubernetes service or something like CosmosDB in particular for things like planet scale data. That's where, having these sort of finished services that come with an SLA, that have patching and scale and a whole bunch of these built-in features that have good monitoring, that have good role-based access control all baked in, can really make the difference. And I think one of the other things that we're trying to do consciously with the cloud is how do we not create a new API for everything and force you to sort of say, okay, I'm betting my entire future on this thing. In some cases we're doing that, but also, with CosmosDB as an example, which is a really phenomenal service from a capability perspective. We now have a MongoDB API to it, a Cassandra API to it.
You talk about lift and shift. The idea that I can take an existing app that runs on Mongo and simply change that provider string to point to a CosmosDB instance.
Yeah. And now get the ability to scale around the world.
Yeah.
And
having done geo-redundant replicated databases in the past,
it's hard.
I never want to do it again.
Yeah, you don't want to do that on VMs.
No,
sir.
And so the idea to me, Cosmos DB is one of those examples of this is cloud distinct, right? That this is taking all of that complexity of a geo-distributed data store and saying, it's just a service. You just write to it. It handles itself. And all of the infrastructure rules are configured separately. They're a separate issue.
I think for a service like that, the thing I talked about a little bit in my keynote today is it also lets you to build new types of apps that you just wouldn't have built before.
Right.
And so, you think about, a lot of the apps that we build today are still very focused on the country that we live in.
Yep.
They're not truly global.
No, they're certainly not.
Partly because if you want to run it in the US and have customers in Europe and customers in Asia and customers in Australia, the latency involved.
Right.
I always tell people you can't ever go faster than the speed of light. If your customers are thousands of miles away from your app, it's never going to be.
Doesn't matter how straight that wire is. Yes. It's a long wire.
It's a long wire. And, the general rules, it's about, I think it's 140 miles of cable adds 1 millisecond of latency. And that's the speed of light.
Yeah.
And so you think about, a web page, you load it, you're pulling 7 or 8 different JavaScript or CSS files. Mm-hmm. If you're thousands of miles away or going over tens of thousands of miles of cable, it's never going to be beyond a certain set. And we live with that today. But, in the world tomorrow, when you can take advantage of a cloud and run an instance of the app in Australia and run an instance of the app in Europe and run an instance of the app in the US and all the other countries, you can suddenly get this, amazing lightning fast performance.
Right.
And the data has been the part that's still the hardest to replicate.
Sure.
And that's where something like Cosmos DB is a game changer because not only does it let you replicate it from a availability perspective, but if you can have active apps with data reconciling,
so that you have regionalized data.
That's an amazing place.
Doable with other techniques. Just hard. You need an expert.
Guaranteed. I mean, you have a guarantee in terms of latency, right?
Yeah. We guarantee single digit millisecond response time.
Yes. Crazy.
At the 99th percentile, which is doubly crazy because it's not just average. We're talking about the 99th percentile. And so once you have that kind of capability, again, you can build new types of apps. And some of the stuff I showed, talked about again in the keynote was how do you take that planet scale data that's rapid fire, you can store petabytes of it, it's replicated all over the world. And then if you can combine that with serverless computing, you can now, every time a data changes in the model, you can actually run a serverless code execution.
Right.
And so now you can suddenly, every time someone, views their shopping cart or visits a different page or, scrolls through the comments on .NET Rocks, you can be in the background running code that maybe is using AI to actually take that insight, that bit of data and turn it into insight and then push it back into the application so that on the next click, you're showing, here are the 3 other shows that you might be interested in. And that ability to start weaving in infinite amounts of data globally with asynchronous serverless code that can actually execute and get smarter and then coupling that with AI, really starts to change how we can build apps.
And you don't have to own the infrastructure. You don't.
And
who wants to?
Building a system like that was global, even say 3 years ago or 5 years ago, you were talking about I'd be a well-funded startup.
Yeah, with a set of extraordinarily skilled engineers in different locations.
And now you can do that. We have a free trial in Azure, and you can basically, and we have now it's a 1 year free trial, so you can actually use Cosmos DB for a year.
Wow,
and
that's a good idea.
You can now build that app for free.
Yeah,
it's
crazy, and actually see the value. Well, I would think somebody's at a place with an app where they're starting to look at what it's going to take to be geolocated. Yeah. And then have a year. I appreciate that because I know 90 days is enough time. You're not going to get all those things tested. A year is enough time to really do it.
And the way that, some of the way that the cloud economics are starting to kick in, with things like our serverless computing option. I told the story in the keynote today. We have a customer that is in the kind of manufacturing space and they're using IoT and a bunch of really advanced analytics. It's doing some really interesting stuff. And, they started going live in production and they were firing off 1 billion of serverless events per day using our Azure Function Service, which is a lot. And then, they called us, in a panic about a week afterwards and said, there's something wrong with your billing system. And, we went, what? And they said, this it's $40.
That can't be right.
That can't be right. And we said, oh, that can't be right. And we went and followed up and investigated and came back to him and said, yeah, actually, it is right.
It's $40.
And they went, yay. And we went,
you're charging too little. They wanted to pay more.
And, suddenly it was like, wow, you're saying we could execute 1 billion of these things for $40?
Yeah.
And then, it changes the equation where you start to go like, well, gosh, if it's so cheap to get value, because, in 1 billion AI calculations, you can add a lot of value. It starts to say, well, gosh, if we did 1 trillion,
it'd be $40,000.
Yeah, but what can we do with 1 trillion AI?
A big number.
That's a big number, but it starts to get you to kind of sort of say, well, if I can do it at this scale,
right?
I can do it at 10x the scale, and it doesn't break the bank.
Something you wouldn't even think about doing in the past, because you don't have that.
And then suddenly you can attack different types of problems. And so, for Black Friday that just happened in November, some of our retailers using, say, again, CosmosDB scaled to 100 trillion transactions that day.
Wow.
100 trillion. I thought that
ridiculous.
Was a typo.
Yeah,
and I made the team go like, they really? And, when you can start to do, and it's, again, it's not because they had 100 trillion visits to their website,
right?
But it was basically, every interaction, every shopping cart ad, how can you in real time calculate next best action for that customer?
Yeah.
And again, in the past, you wouldn't do that because it would have been required, a bunch of rocket scientists to figure out how to build it. And it would cost a fortune to run.
Yeah.
And now, the ability to sort of say, let's spike out this idea in a couple hours.
That's crazy.
And then know that we can run it at a very small scale, but we can also scale it to 100 trillion. It's mind blowing. And I think that's going to be the fun time for us developers over the next couple of years is these problems that we just couldn't even conceptualize.
Right.
We can now do.
Yeah.
Hold that thought for just a minute while we take a moment for a very important message. We've all come to expect that distributed databases can't be both globally consistent and scalable. But what if you didn't have to make trade-offs? What if you could have a fully managed database service that's consistent, scales horizontally across data centers, and speaks SQL? Introducing Cloud Spanner, a mission-critical relational database service from Google Cloud Platform. Built from the ground up and battle-tested at Google for strong consistency and high availability at a global scale. Learn more about Cloud Spanner online at g.co/getspanner. That's g.co/getspanner. And we're back. You're listening to .NET Rocks. Carl Franklin, Richard Campbell, Scott Guthrie is here. We're talking about the amazing thing that is Azure and all of its... we're talking about serverless stuff. And getting back to the comment that you read, Richard, where the commenter... Scott was talking about step functions. AWS step functions. And we were talking about, hey, I wonder if something like that exists on Azure. My mind immediately went to logic apps. And I don't know if that is really the appropriate analog, but
logic apps is a lot more, but conceptually, it's the ability to create long-running workflows, and in particular the ability to stitch together multiple steps and take advantage of declarative connectors. So we have I think about 130 or 150 connectors now. And so, we've got, connectors, obviously not just to Azure services, but
out to the third party. So the Salesforces of the world.
Salesforce or Dynamics or Microsoft Teams or Slack or SharePoint on-prem even, and or SAP or Oracle or SQL.
When I like this idea, again, this is platform play of, I don't have to write the code to figure out how to log into a Slack.
Yeah.
There's a Slack connector. You give it the credentials and off it goes.
Yeah.
And then, that connector has built-in monitoring. And so I can basically not only build an app, but, the things I always like to show is, now let's actually show how from an IT perspective or from a DevOps perspective, I can actually monitor this workflow and know when something's going wrong or when it's taking longer.
How many calls are made.
Debug it and et cetera. And
I'll probably get a security audit path out of that as well.
You get built-in security
and what aren't.
Compliance checking and all that stuff.
Yeah, and that's all code you didn't write.
Yep.
Yeah.
It just came in the box.
And I think, again, I think the pricing model we now have, again, you could do kind of millions of these things for peanuts.
For dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a small number of dollars.
Yes.
And, a lot of these workflows, like a million things don't change typically in your CRM system in a month. But if you can sort of easily stitch together those things, and then what's nice about Logic Apps is, in addition to the built-in connectors we have, you can plug in your own APIs and your own serverless code. And so the ability to kind of take advantage of these built-in connectors to get the data and munch the data, but then I can always drop down and I can write a C# function that is going to write some custom procedural code.
Yep.
We're going to run it in a serverless way.
Yeah.
And again, that doesn't add to my bill because I could do a billion invocations of it for $40.
Yep.
And, that really starts to let you do some pretty amazing stuff. And, for so many of, I think, the organizations that we work in, some of the highest value code that we can write is when we enable you to easily integrate all the different systems you already have.
Right.
And so if your organization is using Office or it's using Gmail or you're using Slack or using Teams or using SharePoint or using Box or you're using Dropbox and so forth, like being able to sort of say, oh, someone changed something, or there's a customer that's upset, or, there's a high prospect customer visiting our website. Let's kick off a workflow. Who's going to reach out to that person and make them happy? Even things like as a developer, if you're using Visual Studio Team Services or TFS or Jive, or you're using Jira, or, any of these different tools that we use, for source control. One of the demos I showed even this morning in my keynote was, how do I take a GitHub webhook event of just an issue being raised and basically write code that allows me to, post it into a team room or a Slack channel, or send an email to someone to take an action. And, it's 5 lines of code.
Right.
And, if you run it serverlessly, it's probably going to cost you less than 5 cents a month, even if you get tens of thousands of issues.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say that VMs are expensive, but you have to buy a whole compute for running a VM for stuff like that. Like, you wouldn't make a separate VM for every one of those instances. You would probably consolidate a bunch of them. Still, it's like, I think you'd end up spending more money.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say probably about, certainly for anything that's occasional.
Right.
Serverless almost always saves you money.
Sure.
And so, if you've got, other patterns I always talk about is, for your front end website that's getting hit a lot, it probably might not save you money. It might just be cheaper to have, it probably would be cheaper to have a web app.
A web app versus a VM.
Inside Azure than a VM. Yeah. But, you think about like the back end systems of your website. And so anytime someone places an order or asks you to do something, anything you put something in a queue and then dequeue it, that dequeuer is perfect for serverless computing.
Sure.
And it's not great, it's just great from a cost perspective, but it's also great from just an architectural pattern perspective because you don't have a for loop polling, and the for loop polling a queue is not going to work once you get to thousands of messages per second.
You have to own all that plumbing, essentially.
We're working on an app for a customer in Azure right now that has a combination of functions for the quick things that don't take a lot of time to do, and worker roles for the long running processes. And that works just great. I mean, it's a perfectly awesome combination of things to.
We're even doing things now for the, say the long running stuff. That's kind of cool. There's something called durable functions, which is I think in preview right now, and it allows you to maintain state across function invocations. And so if you, for example, want to go to sleep while you're waiting on a long running activity, and then it wakes up, it'll actually restore the state and effectively kind of does sort of an async based.
Well, that's really great. I mean, that's really great. That covers a whole host of problems that you might have otherwise gone to work role for.
And, we're starting to do other things where we've integrated. We have some really rich API management services inside Azure. And so let's say you want to expose an API for others to call. You can do things like rate limiting, or you can basically do quotas so that, you don't have one person that takes down your system because they're calling it a million times.
Yeah. And however accidentally or deliberately that may have been. We did a show on with Vicious Lele, I think. About especially that particular feature. And the whole thing is you don't have to decide at the beginning,
correct,
I'm going to need to put this service in. It's almost like you built it internally, then suddenly there's a need for external customers. Well, how are we going to expose this? And well, here's this service that's what what this is for. Yep. And it provides the ability to create external identities and you can bill out on it if you want, and you can rate limit, and you can have some certainty that's not going to cripple a service.
API management.
Totally.
Yeah, love it.
It's good stuff.
One of the more recent things that was announced was the Visual Studio App Center. And I just think it's a very broad viewpoint. And this is less about, services for your software as it is services for your development process, which I think is a whole other aspect of Azure. I think that makes a huge difference for folks.
Yeah. I mean, I think, generally one of the things we're trying to do with just Visual Studio all up is, how do we move beyond just being an IDE,
sure,
to really thinking about the end-to-end developer lifecycle. And obviously with first TFS and then Visual Studio Team Services in the cloud, we've gone to a model where we're thinking a lot more about issue tracking, Kanban board, project management, Agile, CI/CD.
The real application management lifecycle.
And to the extent that we can stitch all those things together, you can obviously use them independently, but to the extent that we can help a team basically adopt a modern DevOps or modern Agile-based practices.
Right.
Is just as important as IntelliSense or debugging in the core editing experience.
We were laughing about, we haven't done a show with you since 2013, but I remember that show, and I remember us being together at NDC. And one of the things you said at the time was, I really want Azure to be a place where people fall into the pit of success.
Yes.
Right. Like that there's only the path of least resistance results in goodness. And so, taking on the ownership of that pipeline. Like, again, you don't have to own the plumbing. You can plug in the bits, and let us make some suggestions for you of where these things would go together, so that you certainly can't go wrong, and you'll probably be your better self in the process. You make it super easy to drop some good automated testing in that pipeline, and a good, real coherent mechanism for, you want to shorten up these test cycles? Here's how you disassemble the set of tests and run it across multiple instances. Like, all that stuff seems to be there. It's just literally like a shopping list. You don't have to think of it, research it, or invent it.
Yeah. And, it's not like we do everything for you, but the more you can come up with the patterns that are based on, real world customers that are doing real world large scale stuff. And if you can then take that pattern and again, package it up so that, people that just use the product fall into what I call the pit of success as opposed to the pit of failure, which is, where they accidentally do stuff. We had a few of those along the way.
I had a year like that once, actually.
Yeah, it just means that when you start to do something big, you kind of realize, geez, it's not so hard to do it.
Yeah.
And, we talked about CosmosDB, we talked about serverless functions. Both those are great examples, I think, of, if you build a simple function that gets called, let's say, once a second, the pattern that we guide you towards with serverless functions where you don't share state across the function invocations, you don't have your own dispatcher, you don't have, your own pool of VMs that you're managing stuff, means that when you get to the point where instead of 1 per second, you're doing 1 million per second.
Right.
You don't have to change the code.
Yeah. The code's still right.
The code's still right. Yeah. Same with CosmosDB.
Right.
I can just scale it up. And I think the same is very much true for, the tools that we provide with the Visual Studio family in terms of guiding people towards that. And App Center is a great example of, if you're building native mobile apps, again, it's not just about the front end. And obviously with Xamarin and a lot of the other investments, we're focused on the front end.
Yep.
But it really is sort of, okay, well, how do I do continuous integration so that every time I make a check-in, I'm building it not just on my dev machine, but actually on a CI server.
Right.
How do I test it so that I know my app works not just with the latest version of Android and the latest version of iOS, but that last version or that random point version that still 4% of my users are using?
Yep.
How do I run on different screen form factors? There's the iPhone 10, but there's also new, smaller, less expensive iOS phones.
Yep.
Buying all of those and having them and testing your apps manually is tough. And so, with App Center, we basically have now, I can't remember how many thousand, I think we have over 1,000 different phones in our cloud. and they're racked up in a data center.
That's Xamarin's old test cloud.
Yeah, it includes all the old test cloud stuff. And so now
I've seen pictures of that. I mean, it's literally these wire racks, phones side by side, cameras mounted above them.
Yep.
It's really an odd little world that they...
It's a pretty amazing thing. And, and the beauty is, you just submit your test.
And then watch it. When you're looking at those videos, those are actual phones actually running your software and being different. It's funny.
Hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
It must be that happy time again.
Yeah. It's time to check out my CosmosDB logs to see how many people just turned off this show. Billions and billions. Billions.
Carl
Sagan.
That's right. You Saganize yourself.
I channeled Carl Sagan.
There you go.
It's actually time to give away a DXperience subscription from DevExpress to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. Become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best without limits or compromise. And check out their DevExtreme React Grid, built from the ground up to fully support all the cool features that come with React, like the virtual DOM and state controllers like Redux and all that stuff. It supports master detail, sorting, grouping, paging, and editing, and you can check it out and test it for free on GitHub. Learn more and download your free 30-day trial of DevExpress Universal at devexpress.com/superhero.
Well, all right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner is Simon Spector.
Congratulations, Simon. Yes. I'll clap for you, sir.
Simon just won the DXperience subscription, a big pile of awesome from our friends over at DevExpress, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you don't know what that is, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world, and every show we like to give away stuff from our sponsors, and every December we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member of the fan club. But you got to sign up to win. Now you know what's coming. We like to ask our guest, Scott, if you had $5,000 to spend on technology today, what would you buy? Azure credit.
I bet he has a bunch. I'm just guessing.
I think maybe.
Yeah.
I think probably something in the IoT space.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's amazing what you can now do.
Yeah.
I just, one of my kids just got the new Sphero EDU device. It's like $100.
What is that? I don't know what it is.
It's basically, it's like this circular ball that can roll on the ground and spin and make noise and all that stuff.
All right.
And you Bluetooth pair it to a tablet, and you can basically, both in script as well as sort of a block-based programming, program the thing
to move around in different ways.
Oh yeah, and react when it bumps into something and stuff. And so it's kind of it's perfect for kids that want to get into tech. But it's amazing just looking at this device that is got a gyroscope and can actually move and navigate around rough terrain. Just think that this thing is now so cheap versus 5 years ago, this thing would have cost a fortune. And I think with a lot of the IoT equipment that's coming out, when it can do air quality, it can do light, it can do perception, it can do voice, it can do listening. The ability to get some of these cool devices, it's pretty awesome. Scott Hansman's doing this talk about the artificial pancreas today.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, he's bringing all these different boards because he's a diabetic and, just showing off some of the hardware and some of the software. It's an amazing solution that he's now using. Yeah. It's life-changing for people.
Sure.
And it's
and for him, right?
Yeah,
this is his life that he's dealing with.
And I think there's a lot of other problems that just with a couple $1,000s.
I'd like to get a whole box full of those Sphero things and sort of program a physical game that you could play in a space designed for it.
Yeah,
I remember Sphero jumped on the scene. They've been around for a while. They built some interesting, cool. But it was when the new Star Wars came out and BB-8 appeared. And of course, BB-8 in the movie was purely a CGI, nothing real. And you could never make that work. And the Sphero guys had one within a month. It's here it is. It's because they already had the rolling ball. They just figured out the magnetic head and there they were. And suddenly they've just been in the world. This is a set of products, but they still have their original line. The Sphero line is very interesting.
Yeah.
It's just a great programmable experience.
Sort of try to figure out how I could wire up more stuff in my home.
Right. Yeah, sure.
And, again, with the IoT now, it's pretty straightforward to do it.
Yeah. And very programmable. You are only programming the glue a lot of times, right? A lot of interfacing and sticking different bits together. And then the only time the code shows up, I find myself writing more Python as glue stuff in my life than real development. Not that I do any real development. Like, we were having this conversation the other day. It's like, when's the last time I opened up a blank coding screen to write code for somebody that was going to pay for it? That was a while ago. But this weird little, I pick up a language to solve a particular problem and put it back down again. That's the life today.
Totally.
I just wonder if that's going to be normal from now on, that all of our kids will have a little bit of programming chops, because it's kind of how you solve problems in your house.
Yeah, and I think even some of these sort of different experiences, like Jake for Sphere, like they have a nice block-based programming model, which is again, it's not general purpose and it's got limitations,
but for that task,
for that type of task, and certainly for the for kids or education, it's great. There's also a really good site that we have called makecode.com, which is something my team actually does, and it's also a great tool for education and for new developers, and it has both a block-based programming model as well as a TypeScript-based programming model.
Nice.
And what's cool is you basically build an app. There's a simulator, runs all in a browser, doesn't require any tools, and then you can download this little script from the app, and then there's a bunch of different hardware devices that you can buy. They're $10, $15 that you basically plug into the USB port of the computer, and then you just save this file. It looks like a drive, and it programs the IoT equipment. And then you can push a button and things light up or play sounds, or you can program the LED. And then again, the ability to kind of capture someone's imagination, especially someone who's new to programming. I just think of all the really, frankly, not very interesting programming problems I had to do when I first started, reversing linked lists, or, counting the words or sorting words in a text file.
Oh, man.
Now it's like, we can have BB-8 running around our house.
Too, all right. I mean, that was
it's fun too, but you had to kind of you had to kind of imagine I'm doing this so that I can do something really interesting in the future. And now, I just love the fact that, my 7-year-old, who is definitely not interested in sitting down and learning raw algorithms at this point, can get
a little bit of that.
Can get a little bit of that and kind of go like,
experience.
I want to be a programmer when I grow up. And know that at that young age.
So what else is cool in Azure in preview that we might not know about it?
Well, there's lots of stuff. I just think Azure every week there's something new. And it's both in terms of new services, but then also just continual evolution and improvement and enhancement of existing services. And oftentimes, the bulk of the innovation is now coming with existing services. And the good news there, it just means if you're already using the service, there's more features and capabilities to leverage. But, a couple that I've been trying to point everyone at to make sure they use is, and I'm doing a talk even later today at this conference about it. It's the first tip I show is the Azure Advisor system. Which I'm always amazed. It seems like less than 10% of people that use Azure. You're shaking your head.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. No, I don't.
So basically, you click it. It's on the left-hand side of your portal. It's called Advisor, and it launches an analysis service that basically will look at all your subscriptions and will come back and tell you what are the problems you have around high availability and how to be more reliable. Wow. What are all the security problems you have?
Wow.
How to actually save money and reduce your bill. And then the last thing it tells you is on a performance perspective, where are all the things that we've identified that you're probably running into a performance throttle.
Wow.
And you can optimize it. And it's not like a white paper. It like literally is based on your telemetry and your system. And it's free, 100% free. And you can even, if you don't like one of the recommendations or you say, I got to do this, but it's the holiday season, I'm in lockdown. There's a snooze button and you just tell us, remind me in a month. And then when you rerun the tool, it'll show up again in a month.
Wow.
And hide until then. And it's, again, who doesn't want to be more reliable, be more secure, save money, and get better perf?
That's amazing.
And so and it's been in general availability for a year.
Not know about this?
So I definitely recommend if you're an Azure customer listening to the show, try it out.
In fact, I'm going to go do it right now.
Yeah.
We're done. See you later.
Yeah. Done recording.
Yeah.
Moving on.
As soon as we're done, I'm going to run that.
And similarly, I'd say the Azure Security Center is another one that's free. And, for most of our customers that are using it, it basically identifies a whole bunch of places where they're not following security best practices.
Sure.
You know, they don't have role-based access control turned on. They've got ports open.
Analyzes their code?
It analyzes basically how you've configured Azure.
The infrastructure.
And, we can even tell, for example, are you encrypting your disks? Is your OS up to date? And so you can opt in so that we can even take telemetry from your applications if you want to. So it's totally optional. Wow. And so we can tell you, for example, are there not just OS updates that you're missing for both Windows and Linux, but we can even tell you framework wise. And so that OpenJDK security issue that various people ran into, you have the same problem. You should be updating yourself too.
So you lead them to the patch too.
Yeah,
I remember, and I can't remember
it's
where
free. That's the other reason why.
Yeah, please use it.
Please use it because we know if people build more secure apps, they're more successful. And
sure,
and so
and I got to think like the last thing you want is an app living on Azure that gets breached. Yeah. I remember you saying, and I couldn't tell you where. Somebody asking you like, what keeps you up at night, and you said a breach in Azure. Yeah. Sure. That security issues around Azure are like number one in your mind. And when I saw Spectre and what was the other one?
Meltdown.
And both variations of the same theme, which is that that Intel processors using look-ahead optimization to potentially expose data. I remember when I first read it thinking, this is what Scott was talking about. Not his fault at all, but it's like if anybody figured out a way, and I can't imagine how you would actually exploit these vulnerabilities. If anybody figured out a way, like this is the nightmare scenario. And of course you guys are on top of it. Yeah. But can you walk me through that from your perspective? Because I think that's got to be, you may have known about it for a while because it only came public, I think, in January. But
yeah, I mean, in general, I think from a security perspective, I think the reason I said, the thing that always keeps me up at night is, really it's around quality and making sure all the services are working.
Sure.
It's around security and it's making sure that we try to provide a good support experience. And so, those are things that are independent of features that are paramount when you're running a service.
Right.
And, and certainly on the security side, you can't be too paranoid. And so,
who would have thought? Paranoid. And the funny thing is when you read the description of what happened there, you totally know how we got there. Because doing predictive viewing, the processor's so fast, you might as well do this because you're waiting anyway. But to add the security constraints into it, it's almost impossible in a lot of respects. Like they're literally going to have to redesign the chips to make this make sense.
Yeah, and it's it's the fact that it's been there for 20 years.
Yeah, it shows how whoever's exploited. I would presume since the NSA breach, the fact that it wasn't in that breach means nobody's exploited it.
Yeah, we certainly have no indication that anyone's exploited it yet. But, part of the thing that, we obviously did as soon as we learned about it was trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we guarantee no one can exploit it?
Sure.
Right.
And so,
and you guys being operating system guys, like you're in a place before the hardware is fixed to say, is there a way we can solve this?
Yeah. And we were able to, the day it became public, deliver patches for Windows, both client and server, and then obviously for Azure. Yeah. And the trick for something like Azure is, we've got millions of servers, and a fix like this is a fairly big thing.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so, it's not just from a how do you make sure people are secure, but just from a performance and correctness and quality perspective.
Yeah.
How do they not have issues? And I think thankfully we found that the mitigations we put in place that block the issue. We're not seeing significant performance feedback. We're not seeing really any performance.
Well, there's lots
feedback.
of people who are saying that this will be a 30% performance hit on processors. And I was looking at it as a skeptic, just going, "That's a pretty specific number. That seems unlikely."
Well, different ones of the issues have different performance impacts.
Sure.
So, like, from a criticality perspective, Meltdown, which was basically the ability to go outside your VM,
right?
And
that seemed like the one is like, this is a nightmare scenario. That's the nightmare cloud provider.
And thankfully, that one from a performance impact perspective is relatively small,
right?
And that's the one that all the cloud vendors kind of rolled out immediately.
Yeah, where Spectre was more of the cache-based stuff.
Well, the Spectre is basically, think of it as intra VM,
right?
And so, in other words, inside your VM, or inside a system that's hosting your app. can you have untrusted code read other processes' memory,
right,
or go from user mode process to the kernel of the VM,
right,
the hypervisor? And that one, at least those types of Spectre mitigate or issues, at least there you've had to allow untrusted code into your app.
The customer was part of the breach. Something went wrong for them too. Their credentials are involved.
And generally, I would say it's if you are running code inside your app, you're already at some risk, independent of this exploit, that if that code is malicious, it could do something. So in other words, people always say like, oh my God, what if my database vendor was evil? Could they exploit using the Spectre attack and get inside?
Why would they bother if they were evil? They already have control of it.
That's what I always tell people is like, you're right, they could, but
there's easier ways.
There's easier ways for them to do evil things because you've already put your data in their database.
Yeah.
So it's, but I don't mean to minimize, because there are cases where, especially if you're a SaaS vendor and you have an extension that someone uploads, that's where you'd want to make sure that you're using the Spectre mitigations.
Sure.
And for anything that's sort of multi-tenant inside a single VM, you want to be careful about it. So it's definitely stuff that we, obviously we had to take very seriously and make sure that we protect against. And it's, I do think this overall hardware space is going to be an evolving security area.
Sure.
And I think this is similar to the buffer overruns from 20 years ago.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Where once people went, I should be looking everywhere for buffer overruns, you kind of had a wave of attacks across products as people found them. And I think now suddenly people are going, whoa.
Let's spend more time in the microcode. The black hats are looking at the microcode.
Let's now do some pen testing of the hardware to see what else is available. And so it's
you're actually seeing that the security industry is getting more sophisticated at looking at potential risks.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly in terms of just the good news and also then the bad news is the security industry is getting more and more sophisticated. On the bright side is that's true both on the offense but also on the defense.
Yes.
And so things like the Azure Security Center that I described that we make for free is that type of intel and that type of set of recommendations to protect your infrastructure would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars of consulting time.
Sure.
And would be something that you'd have to redo every month with new consultants because in an on-prem world, there's just no way to even gather the data. And now with the cloud, we can just literally push a button and it tells you in real time
what's going on.
And that really changes the ability for you to be much more secure.
Yeah. The few major cloud vendors, Azure being one of them, have a view on computing worldwide that I think is unique now, that you simply can see things industry-wide that we can't otherwise see. And it allows you to I do feel like the detection and reaction to Meltdown and Spectre feel like the white hats are ahead of the game. That this was found and mitigated ahead of an exploit.
Yeah.
As far as we can tell.
As far as we know, yeah.
We'll never know absolutely sure, but probably.
And it was, the amount of people that knew it as early as they knew it. I mean, it is pretty amazing that even though it was basically leaked about a week before the official disclosure date,
right? But
at least it wasn't leaked 4 months before.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the amount of vendors that had to do some pretty major surgery to react to it, it really was a very coordinated effort. And we even helped put together a meeting where we brought in a lot of the other big cloud OS and hardware vendors, and actually did a kind of a summit on this particular topic, and actually,
I imagine very much behind closed doors, like
very much behind closed doors,
very exclusive club.
Yeah, and we basically even shared here are the exploit proof of concepts that we've come up with.
Right.
Let's actually share them so that we can all test it.
Did anybody come up with different ones, just to sort of build the largest solution possible?
Yeah, I mean, it was very much this is not something that any of us want to try to use
as a commercial
or competitive advantage. You don't do that with these types of issues.
And everybody came to the table too. So it speaks well for the good guys.
Yeah, and I think it's a great example of the industry kind of working well together and really trying to protect customers in the right way. And so just and I think in some ways even just some of the connections we formed through this most recent security issue, it's something where we can and do really try to share across
it's good.
the different vendors on the security side to make sure.
You see those gatherings happening on a routine basis now just to stay ahead?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not always gatherings, but it's, once you talk to someone,
it's a little trust established.
You can always reach out and say, hey, I've heard something. Have you heard this? And I do think, again, it's
really kind of good news in the end. Really.
Yeah, customers win.
Yeah.
In that.
Well, and I think, we talk about characters, what shows in times of adversity. Like, this was an adverse moment, and the character of the major players all showed that they came together to fight the good fight, which is, it's a, I don't know, there are parts of this world right now that are remarkably bumpy about that sort of thing. I kind of like it when we do the right thing for the right reason at the right time.
Agreed.
Just to remind ourselves that we don't suck all the time. Because there's times it feels like we kind of suck as a civilization.
Yeah.
but these are the good pieces. I almost think we shouldn't get into an AI discussion at this point. It's kind of late in the show because it's a whole other topic area.
Yeah,
really.
we definitely should come back and talk to us about that.
Yeah.
6 minutes left, but
it's kind of the wrong time to get into that.
Are there any new sort of redundancy features in Azure that we haven't heard about, or any kind of assured computing kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things that we've released over the last couple months that I want to make sure people take advantage of. Some of the new things around managed disks, which provide a whole bunch of benefits, in particular around, it's just easier to manage.
This is in VMs?
Yeah, with VMs.
Right.
And I definitely recommend anyone that has a VM that was created in the past, make sure you've converted to managed disks. You don't need to delete the VM. There's a simple command you can run to actually convert your old disks.
Wow.
But one of the nice benefits around that is it ensures that your disks are distributed across separate storage clusters.
Okay.
Nice.
And so that means, like, even if we were to lose a part of a data center or an entire storage cluster went down, your app would still stay up. Nice. And, it's a great kind of high availability feature that, we've seen, adds an extra 2 nines to VMs in terms of uptime.
Wow.
But again, it's really easy to take advantage of. Our batch compute, Azure batch service, has been growing leaps and bounds. And one of the nice things it has is the ability to kind of schedule jobs. And so anytime you're trying to do something, it's encoding a video or encoding of audio, definitely look at the Azure Batch service. And one nice feature that Azure Batch has now is what's called preemptible jobs. And so we'll give you a 70% discount if, when you submit a job, we're allowed to interrupt the job if another high priority job comes in.
Yeah.
And most times we don't interrupt it.
Right.
But,
it's a batch job. You probably...
it's often very interruptable.
Yeah.
And
sure.
Again, if you
it
can
has to be done eventually, but not right now.
If you can get a 70% price discount on your work, that translates into real savings.
Yeah, you're not offering a little discount. That is a big discount.
Can those managed disks be easily extended? Because I know that was that's a problem I had, at least with system drives not being able, they run out of space, and you're kind of like, oh my god, what do I do?
You can resize managed disks, and then also I know we support 4 terabyte disks now.
Wow.
Whereas we used to have like a 1 terabyte limit, and I think our goal this year is to get to 16 terabytes.
Wow.
You can obviously stripe multiple disks together, but like once you have even 4 terabytes, you're kind of...
So we want you to move out of the VM, but if you're not going to, we're going to make it as nice for you as possible.
Yeah.
I like that.
But if after 4 terabytes, what are you doing?
That's when you get a call. Excuse me. I'd like to.
Other things we recommend people check out would be the reserved instances that we shipped late last year.
What's that?
Basically, if you've got a VM that's running, take the one that you're using, for 20% of your app. If you kind of say, well, gosh, I'm going to run this for a year, you basically go to the portal and you say, I want to buy a reserved instance, and we'll lower the price in some cases up to 70%. And
you reserve it for amount of time.
And in return, you're basically going to say, I'm going to use it for a year.
Yeah.
Right.
So if it's something you think you're going to turn off tomorrow, don't buy a reserved instance.
Sure.
Okay.
But right now, pricing is based on you can turn it off whenever you want.
Yeah.
So if you can give a commitment because you're going to keep running it, you're going to get us a deal.
And you can do either 1 year or a 3-year commitment. And what's nice is it's not tied to a specific VM. That's sort of a nice sort of difference versus some of our competitors.
Wow.
And so you just sort of you can assign the reserve. Basically you buy, let's say 5 RIs, which is reserved instances. And let's say you run 7 VMs. we'll apply it to 5 of the VMs, and then you'll pay the standard,
rate for the others.
That's so cool.
Rate for the others, and then so it's a really nice way you can save money.
Yeah.
Other things I'd kind of recommend is check out our new Cloud-In Cost Management. It's a company we bought this past summer, and we've made free for all Azure customers. And so you basically just pump your bill through there, and it will basically give you tons of analysis on how to save money. Wow. You can tag individual resources now in Azure. So you could say, like, this is for .NET Rocks, this is for a different show, this is for dev test. And
it'll help me construct a cost of service for a given product across.
It's
called what now?
It's called Cloud-In.
Cloud-In.
But basically, you just go to the Azure portal, click on Cost and Management on the left-hand side, and there's a link to it. And eventually, we'll integrate it into the overall experience. But we basically, within about a month of buying them, integrated it.
Wasn't it?
It was an acquisition, yeah. And we're seeing a huge uptake amongst Azure customers. But it helps you identify underutilized resources, and then even for enterprises, you can do internal chargebacks. And generate effectively
that's where I was going with it.
Chargeback PDF reports or Excel spreadsheets that you can give to departments.
Well, it also gives you an incentive to, is it worthwhile optimizing this? Like, are we seeing enough billing that's like, this seems to be costing more than it needs to? Is it worth? Because cycles for evaluation and for tuning are expensive. So it's until you feel like you can move a number substantially, what's the point of even looking?
And we talked about CI/CD and DevOps earlier. The other thing to go check out in the Azure portal is you go click the new button, and then there's a DevOps project that shows up. That's just we did a bunch of updates even last week on that. And that basically walks you through a wizard to set up a full CI/CD DevOps. Even if you don't have VSTS installed, it'll create the account.
Wow.
And you pick your language and your framework, and we'll even put in a default repository with sample tests and a build pipeline setup.
Wow.
And in about 3 minutes, you can have a full continuous integration delivery model with testing, with an app service.
Oh, that's stuff we used to charge our customers for, Scott.
Sorry.
Wait, we'll still charge them, but we'll do it in 3 minutes and then go have a beer.
That's it.
Exactly.
Don't show it to them for a day.
So that's all some new stuff in the last few months.
Very cool.
Nice.
And then the new availability zone support that's now in preview for Azure, gives you, going back to your availability aspect, that basically means, even if a data center burned down, your app would stay up because we basically distribute your services and infrastructure across multiple isolated buildings.
So one building is the parity building, right? No. Sorry, Ray joke.
Oh, it's getting geekier in the room today.
This has been great talking to you. It's been too long since we talked.
Yeah, we could do it again more often.
Absolutely.
No, thanks again, Scott.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1. Recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.